I grew up in a family that's very automotive inspired, right? So my dad was in the car business. He was is also an enthusiast. So I grew up in that world, and it's almost, I didn't even realize that I was, absorbing this as a kid. He had a traditional car dealership where I grew up basically after school or in the summertime, and ultimately ended up working there too, where I picked up my craft and I started to learn, the true, back office logistics behind what it takes to operate a business, but in particular a car business. So I think that gave me the fundamental of what I do today, not just from a passion standpoint, which I think has to be first and foremost, but also a true platform to work off of to grow a business. My dad always liked weird, if you want to call them strange cars. So he every time something that was kind of in that range and he saw it, he would buy it. But I remember being a kid, he bought an early 911 one time. At the time, it was just an old car. It wasn't even considered a classic. It wasn't even expensive, but it was kind of like my first introduction to a 911. And I remember that moment vividly. With him in the back street, just kind of hauling ass and seeing what the car can do. A couple of BMWs and Mercedes, and growing up, I loved the Volkswagens too. So there was always a couple of Beetles or the early GTI 16 valve cars and that kind of stuff. First car was actually an 81 Toyota Corolla Coupe 5-speed, and I bought it when I was 9 years old with the intention to sell it and make some money, because that's what I saw my dad doing, right? And the neighbor put a for sale sign for $200, and I went and knocked on his door and offered him $100 for the car. We stored the car in my backyard at my parents' house, right. And I just started up and I'd play with the clutch, I'd move it forward and I put it in reverse and I'd move it back, and that's kind of what I did. That's cool. Just and I cleaned it up, and I took pride in washing the car and vacuuming the car and just kind of making it look as pretty as possible. And then my dad helped me with his resources, of course, at the dealership to sell the car. As I got older, again, I started working for my dad, right, at his dealership. So I took advantage of the fact that he had obviously a dealer's license, and I had the possibility of buying my own cars while I also worked with him, kind of like a secondary income. But then that's where I started with the classics. I was really into that at that time. The old Chevy pickups. So I'd buy them for myself. They weren't necessarily business deals, but I'd put some suspension, some wheels. I kind of like personalize the car a little bit myself, enjoy it, and ultimately I'd sell it through the dealer, and I'd make some money. And with that money, I'd replace it with something else. Always one at a time. It was never, a mass production kind of situation. It was just whatever car I liked, I'd buy. I'd kind of do my little thing with it, enjoy it for as long as I thought or I needed to, and then I'd sell it and always make a little profit at the end. So I had that opportunity to do that over the years. 2008, complete financial collapse globally, right? My dad closes down the dealership due to the economy after over 30 years in business. I had just graduated from college, FIU, and I found myself at that time, just graduated, no job, in the worst time of the economy. I was actually without a job for a little bit. Ultimately, time went on and I found a job with a major insurance company. I worked as an adjuster there. And that's where my whole career kind of started again. I started working full-time, a corporate job, it was comfortable. They gave me a car to take home. I had a cell phone, I had benefits, and I knew that my passion was cars. But I had to start again from zero. I started saving for with what I made from work, and ultimately I bought my first car, turned into a second and a third, and I started now really focusing on buying and selling on the side while I worked full time. Mm-hmm. And I did that for nearly 2 years until I was able to build a little bit more capital, and I be able to continue to buy more cars. That started turning into, I have cars in my garage, cars in my backyard, and I started cars at my dad's house, cars at my neighbor's house. Renting out carports and garages in the neighborhood, whatever I could get cars in, right? These are all specialty cars, and they have to be inside because they were convertibles, they were old, rust, whatever. Until I finally, ultimately, and there's a lot of things that happened in between, where I was able to lock down this space that we're in today, where it's small, but I'm able to, house all my cars under AC, under the roof, well protected, had a name in mind that I'm not gonna mention because it exists already with someone else, and my wife actually came up with the name The Barn Miami, which she told me one time and it clicked, and I said, wow, that's an awesome name. Yeah, for sure. We started looking it up. Domain was available. There was no one else with that name. It made total sense as far as what I wanted to do. It was kind of like a little bit different. And we just went with it. I didn't think about it much. I don't think those kind of things you gotta think about it much. At the end, the name doesn't really mean if it works. It's nice. Let's use it. You know. But you know, the whole idea behind starting the barn was I love cars, and it was my way of being able to be in the world of cars. I knew how many cars I wanted to own and what cars I wanted to own, but the fact is I couldn't afford all that. This gives me the opportunity to have a car, even just for a little bit. I know I need to sell it, but not only do I make a living off of it, it feeds my family, but it also fuels my passion, right?
Right, so, you get to experience.
Right. So it's just my way of being able to be in the world of the automotive culture and everything that surrounds it. I can tell you about the first time, my first Ferrari. It was a 308, a 1982. I found it here locally in Miami. A gentleman owned it for, I think, he was a second owner. So the car was in 82. He bought the car in 84, nearly brand new, and he sold it to me when it was probably like 5 years ago. Yeah. So that was and it wasn't a perfect car. It had a little couple like rust bubbles, I think, but it was a Ferrari. It was, for me, it was like, wow, I bought a Ferrari, and I don't forget that car. I have it well documented as far as photographs and everything is concerned, and I sold to actually a really good friend of mine. Ended up it was a client at the time, ended up being a really good friend of mine. You get into this world of classic cars, and you start to really pick up on as to what car and why and where they came from. You start to dig, and you start to hone in on the craft. You start to really kind of like peeling an onion, right? It's layers and layers, and you start moving in and digging a little deeper, and ultimately, you can't help but come across the mark Alfa Romeo, right? You start looking, wow, a company that's 108 years old, a company with an incredible pedigree for racing. Enzo Ferrari started his career with Alfa. The technology these cars had from the late 50s moving into the early 60s, mid 60s, dual overhead cams, four-wheel disc brakes, 5-speed gearboxes, things that we take for granted today in sports cars, but they were adopted so early on with this mark that it requires to really look into it. It's kind of like a mini Ferrari. It's so undervalued, with incredible design by Bertone, and it's something that I couldn't ignore. I was so attracted to it. Like for the Alphas, for instance, I like with a lower stance, so put the suspension a little more aggressive, not over the top, just nice, clean sport look. Upgrade the wheels and tires, make it more of a. It really improves the quality of the car, and it looks good at the same time. Yeah. So it's always fun to put a little touch into the car. I don't do that with all my cars. I do it with the ones I consider mine, the ones I would keep and drive, or at least have a little bit more of a long-term plan for them. We've had a lot of original cars come through that you say, wow, low mileage, very documented history. To find another one's probably going to be impossible. Cars that come to mind in particular was an 850 CSI BMW, US spec, only 200. It was the M. They weren't badged as M cars. They had a little bit of, on the wheels, they had the M mark, on the motor had the M mark, but they weren't, it wasn't the 850M, it was just the 850 CSI. Only 250 cars ever produced, a 6-speed V12, that shark nose, beautiful car. I thought it was so underrated, not worth a lot of money. Today, they're worth a lot more money. It's a car I wish I would have kept. Mm-hmm. Something I say, wow, I would have kept it for the money. So essentially it was cheap, but at the same time, I have a business to run, so I had to sell the car. But looking back, yeah, I probably would have kept it. I think we've seen a shift in the car culture recently, probably in the last 4 years. I think it's been more of a Euro shift and a different demographic or a different view on the car. I think more focused towards the actual driving experience. and I think the shift simply comes from a younger demographic, right? Now, people my age and your age, and people are just growing up, and that starts to evolve, right?
Mm-hmm.
The taste evolves, and everything changes. So there's certainly been a shift in the culture. Like you said, like we do the Cars and Coffee every Sunday morning. We do the Sip and Discuss, and that's just my little part of kind of contributing to the car scene, the car culture here in Miami, trying to cultivate that, try to truly make something that people can enjoy and count on, right?
That's cool. Where do you see car culture evolving? The car world. What would you like to see the car world evolve to?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's not, and I think it's a question that keeps coming up more and more often as technology is changing, cars are changing, regulations changing. We're seeing autonomous vehicles come out. We're seeing a lot of electric cars come out. We're seeing younger demographic saying, "Hey, I don't want to drive. You know, why drive? You could just click on my phone, have a car pick me up, drop me off. I don't need to park. I don't have to worry about anything." It's become a means of transportation versus like almost like a family member. Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you bought a car and that car became part of the family, you know what I mean? And people would sometimes, for the most part, hold on to them for much longer than we do today. Today we do leases 2-3 years, the car is gone, renew, recycle. It's become like a recycle process. So my hope for the car culture, that I think it's going to be more, and it's already turning into more like an art, right? People save and keep art, and you see them in galleries, and you see them, cars I think have that same element, but even beyond that, because you can enjoy it, right? You can go out and drive this piece of art. So I hope that the car community can come together and preserve what's always been there, because I feel like it will somewhat be lost in the future.
And to wrap it up, do you have like a message to the car scene, to the car world, like anything you would like to say?
I think the main thing when it comes to car enthusiasm, and I think people have it very clear, it doesn't matter what you drive, as long as you have a love for it, right? Any car that you buy, it has to be, because that's the car you've always wanted, that's the car you enjoy, right? Take pride in what you drive, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it doesn't matter what anybody says, and that's what we try to always emphasize on. And the Cars and Coffee, I tell people, come out, and it doesn't matter what you're driving. Don't feel ashamed because a Ferrari pulled up or a Lamborghini pulled up. It's irrelevant. It's about one common passion.